Hello and welcome to Trinity Talk Live. Let me try that again. Hello and welcome to Trinity Talk Live, water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. I am Ben Lander.
I'm Allison Mayer.
Now, as you may notice, hopefully you notice if you are a regular viewer of ours. If you're not, welcome. But if you are a regular viewer, then you notice that Allison is a guest with us today. So I'm going to allow Allison to introduce herself, and as she looks in here.
Oh, right there. Okay. Thank you, Ben. So I am a teacher, a middle school teacher at Trinity Lutheran School. This year I'm teaching 7th and 8th grade science. Last year I taught math. Taught 5th and 6th grade last year. So I'm an avid listener to this podcast. So I am thrilled that I get to help you guys out today. So, yep, thank you.
Yeah, and we just want to openly say thank you so much, Allison, for joining us. The reason that Allison is here with us, although Ken is also here in the studio with us. There's his hand right there. But this is also our filming week for Passion Play, so stay tuned for that. That will be forthcoming. That's something we're excited to be able to present this year. But we are filming that this week, or Ken and Mary Kay are filming that this week. And so there's just a lot going on with that. So Ken had decided to take a step back tonight from hosting. And so Allison has graciously agreed to come on the show with us. Mm-hmm. So we're excited for that. If you are a guest with us, what we do on this show is that, the tagline kind of says it all. We explain this at the beginning each time, but it's water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. So again, there's no shortage of podcasts out there that give their own little spin, their own little perspective of whatever slice of the world you're in. We try to do that from a uniquely Christian perspective. So whatever people are talking about out there, whatever is floating around, we have just a casual conversation, but we try to keep Christ at the forefront of that. And so I'm excited for some of these topics that we've got, especially with your unique perspective, both as an educator and a Christian. Mm-hmm. So, of course, we've got Mary Kay, our producer over here, too, who is also in that same boat. So we got no shortage of opinions here on that. So we're interested to see what happens here. But before we begin, just if you are new with us, if you haven't done it yet, please make sure you subscribe, hit that little subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you get notified every time that we post a new video to this channel. That really helps us out. And this is a interactive show, so please comment. If you are watching us on YouTube, please use the live chat feature and your comment will show up. Let me see if I can get this right, in this little blue box here. Mm-hmm. And if you're on Facebook with us, then you can comment right directly on the Facebook post, and we'll be able to see it in real time and hopefully respond to your comments.
And it will go up on the blue box too.
And it will go on the blue box too. So just have fun with it, and we will try to get to your comments as they arrive. But so speaking of the show, why don't we just dive right in? And so we have a number of topics, and so tonight's episode, we tend to usually pick articles that coincide with our topics. Tonight, we kind of have a couple articles in each topic, so it's more of a topical show. But this first topic that we have is in regards to education. So I'm going to introduce this, and then I'll let Allison weigh in. So the first article here comes from the WTOP.com. So it talks about the Maryland State Board of Education. They've made the decision to delay standardized testing until the fall with everything due to COVID. Now, last year, this time, actually standardized testing, to my understanding, was canceled altogether. Mm-hmm. There was no standardized testing for public schools last year. This year, in the 2020-2021 school year, I think, it has been postponed now. There's been leeway that the federal government has given for schools to postpone it or even reduce the time that it would take for students to take the testing. Usually what would have taken 7 hours. Now they've reduced the English section to 2 hours and 20 minutes, the math section to 1 hour and 20 minutes. And so there's some, it's been generally well accepted. They're just hoping that this proposal is accepted by the U.S. Department of Education. So as an educator, what's your stance? What's your feel on standardized testing? And do you think this is a good decision, a good compromise?
So let me start out by saying that I think standardized testing is necessary to have an understanding of where kids measure up. Okay. You can't compare apples to oranges. And so in order to have a fair understanding of what kids are learning, then there should be some sort of standardized test. In this environment, though, as an educator, the short term, I think it's a great decision. I think that there's enough going on that teachers have to worry about. And this testing, actually, when I did public school and we did testing, it would take a week of instruction. We missed an entire week. The whole school did. And you can get through a lot in a week. So to take a week just to do testing when kids are already behind might not seem like the good idea. Also, when you think about it, if you're doing remote testing, are you going to make sure they don't cheat? Like, how does that work? How are you doing standardized testing for kids that are virtual? There's that moral issue too. You're putting kids at risk for deciding to cheat or whether or not they're going to take the test honestly. So I think in the short term, it's a great idea. Long term wise, my thoughts are like, where does this stop? Are these kids going to be labeled pandemic kids? And is this the start of more excuses we're going to be giving these kids because they are a part of the pandemic? I know that there are colleges and universities that aren't requiring SAT scores. And so there's a lot of colleges that are having influxes of applications because kids don't have to take the SATs. So there isn't that standard for them to measure up to.
Removes a barrier too, so to speak.
Correct. There isn't that threshold or that criteria they have to meet. And so, because it's during the pandemic. So are we going to allow these kids to be labeled pandemic kids and give them excuses for how long? How long is this going to last until we're back to, okay, well, we can now have standardized tests? I think we all know right now that we're behind. I think we realize that. Sure. And I think that I'm really not sure if people want to know how far behind the kids are.
Absolutely.
I think that there's a lot of points I'm making here, but I think, I think it's difficult to see what kids would test at and difficult to see their loss of aptitude. So I think in the short term, it's a good decision. Long term, I'm not sure what the effects are going to be of that, so.
Do you think that by pushing it back to the fall, it may compound the issue of that there's always that summer gap where students tend to lose some of their recollection of that? You think it's going to compound?
I mean, definitely. I think, kids are already behind now and we're in school. So I can definitely see the education, Board of Education coming back and saying, well, these kids haven't had school for the summer, so let's just postpone the standardized test till the spring. Okay.
So does it give an actual date for the fall?
No.
It just says fall.
It just says fall.
Although I do think there is something in this article that said, let's see, there was a board meeting on February 23rd where federally they said they had to do it within the year. So by pushing it back to spring, I don't know if that's outside of those parameters, if they'd be able to do that unless the Department of Education made the exception to do so.
Well, as a math teacher, I can tell you that after the summer, I usually spend the entire first 2 weeks almost like we'll do chapter 1, but chapter 1 in almost every single textbook is a review of what they should have learned already. And you're going through it and you're just trying to make sure they get back to where they were in May, June, whenever you ended. And for the high school, because I taught in high school, for the high schools where they have sometimes more classes than they have in middle school, standardized testing took us 2 weeks sometimes to get through because there was always makeup days. And, so this would be like 2 weeks being taken away from the new year of a new subject. And those teachers are probably going to be pressured to spend at least a week of instruction reviewing for the test.
Yep.
And the whole purpose of standardized testing, at least again at the high school level, at the end of the school year, is that, okay, I taught high school in Virginia, but I think it's similar here in Maryland, was to verify or validate the grade that they were getting in their class.
Yeah.
So if we're giving them a credit in Algebra 1 and they take the standardized test for Algebra 1 and they pass it with whatever is considered a sufficient grade, then it has validated that the grade that I gave them
is accurate.
Are they at grade level?
Is accurate enough that they deserve the credit for the towards graduation.
Yeah.
So, and they shouldn't, if they don't pass it, then they shouldn't move on to geometry. But the way this is happening, that means these kids are going to be moving on to a new class without having almost proven to the state that they have earned the right to move on to that class.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then what do you do with them if they fail the standardized test?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. We have another story that will kind of shed light on this. Although, before we get to that, let me just ask this other question that I think it's great insight that the two of you have. It's unique, too, though, that you're both educators in the private school and specifically Trinity Christian School here. Does a private Christian school have to follow the same standardized testing schedule, or I'm not really
so we do have standardized tests. We do what the federal government mandates for us. We do MAP testing. We do that here. I think we are fully within our right to do it because we are in person. We are teaching them, and I think it's, for me as an educator, it's good to know where I stand. You know, what I need to do better, what I need, what my kids already know. So for me, I personally like the feedback. We do not have to do the high school assessments, which are mandated by the state as a private school. Now, as a public school, you would, of course, have to do both.
Sure.
So, or whichever would apply in your state. So, yeah, we did do.
A little bit different, yeah.
Correct.
Cool.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of that concern.
Although for the math classes that we provide, if there are high school level math classes, in order for our kids to not have to take them again in high school,
They have to pass them. Yeah.
they would probably have to pass the standardized test, because I think a lot of first off, some of our kids go to public schools for high school. That's first. And they'll require it for their own records. But then the other, the ones that go to some of those private schools, a lot of those private schools will still want them to have passed. It might have something to do with, getting a valid
To prove that they know their
diploma
stuff.
here in the state of Maryland.
Yeah. Right.
So, I mean, I don't know enough about Maryland, but I know in Virginia they would have had to pass the standardized test that state had.
It's similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's similar
So,
here.
a point that both of you have been hitting on here is that, what the one thing that the standardized testing is good for is to assess not only the grade, whether or not the student has earned that grade, but also the teacher too. What else do they need to work on with their students? So there's another story here kind of tied into this same topic, and this comes from Fox News, Fox 45 News, and this is local too. A Baltimore high school student who thought that he would be graduating this year, come to find out he had failed all but 3 of his classes over the past 4 years, yet still ranked in the top half of his class. So this student with a 0.13 GPA, according to this local report, was still number 62 out of 120 students. His class size was 120. He still came 62nd out of that, and he's had to now been sent back to the 9th grade. So here a student thought that he'd be graduating, come to find out he's got 3 more years left to complete his diploma. This is kind of a shocking story, but it kind of I'll let you weigh in and kind of share my thoughts here too. But he went to the Augusta Fells Savage Institute of Visual Arts in West Baltimore, and is since now on an accelerated program that could allow him to graduate in 2023. We have a comment here real quick on Facebook. This is, Sherry. Thank you for joining us, Sherry. It says there's little more to that. There is a little more to that ranking. I'm guessing in regards to the standardized testing. I guess it's a little bit more complicated than just that. There's a little more to that ranking, but that's just one of the things that the standardized testing allows. Sherry, if you could elaborate, that'd be appreciated. But thanks for joining us. But the story with this high school student ranking in 62nd out of 120 students with a 0.13 GPA. That means that, for those of you who are math whizzes out there, there are 58 other students with at least a 0.13 GPA or lower in his graduating class. What do you make of that?
I mean, okay, my first response is it's a travesty. This is, I mean, it's a travesty. Okay. Go ahead.
I apologize. Sherry responded. She said, in the Fox News report, she says that there is the ranking listed in the Fox News report. There's a little more to that ranking in the Fox News report. Okay. Yeah, we're just getting that, Sherry, from the foxnews.com. There was an article that Fox News put out and also a clip that they had basically stating the same thing. But that's the numbers that they use, that he was 62nd out of 120.
Yeah. So anyway, my first thought is it's a travesty. It's a failure on a lot of ends, and a lot of people need to be held responsible. The sinful side of me just wants to laugh because it's Baltimore City, and the sinful side of me wants to say, well, it's, the sad part is it's Baltimore City. And that's what's sad about my response, is that it doesn't surprise me that it's in Baltimore City. And I think that just goes to show that there's a failure in leadership across the board in Baltimore City. I think it's a failure in leadership with administration, failure in leadership with teachers that were maybe need to document that if and was he wasn't there. I mean, the article doesn't say how much documentation was there, but if and when he was noted to be absent, if and when his parent was contacted that he was absent.
Sorry not to interrupt you. This says he was absent or late 272 days during his first 3 years.
I mean, you can't be late 272 days and expect to pass.
In Virginia, where I taught, when a kid failed because of their absences and not because of their grade, that was noted on the report card.
Yeah.
It came out on the report card that they got an F.
Yeah.
And then there was a notation that it was because of attendance. And they had to come up with documentation to explain why the kid was gone for that long.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess my question is did he pass? But then fail it because of the absences?
So the article says that they says that he was passed along. Hold on, were you going to respond to that?
Oh, no, I was just saying, for example, he was allowed to take certain classes that had prerequisites that he failed.
Yeah.
So, for example, Algebra 2, he was allowed to take Algebra 2 when he had failed Algebra 1.
Yeah. But did he fail it because of his grades, or did he fail it because of his? That's
unclear. Yeah.
So I mean, if you're absent that much and you're not getting the instruction, you're likely to not understand the material and fail anyway. But then there are kids who miss that much school for other reasons, health reasons, and things like that, and they still manage to learn the material and pass as far as turning in all their assignments and getting the passing grades and understanding the material.
Like mastery assignments.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it could be mastery assignments, or they just get the assignments while they're absent and make them up. But but even if they're excused absences, if you get a certain number of absences, regardless of whether they're excused or not, you can still fail because of the absences. You're only allowed to have a certain number until you bring in documentation that's stronger than a parent writing a note.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, why was he unaware that he had failed? I mean, like I said, if he got a report card.
On a certain level, if you're a high school student, you have to have at least some self-awareness to know I haven't been going, so I shouldn't be passing.
I think that's part of the fact that there's people aren't being held accountable. He's not being held accountable for his own actions. The parents not being held accountable for not, where's your report card? Where's your progress report?
Where's your kid?
If she's getting notified that he's absent, why are you absent? Where are you? And the fact that the article says that the school promoted him after failing Spanish 1 and Algebra 1, still allowed him to take Spanish 2 and Algebra 2. Well, I know for a fact that if my kids aren't passing Algebra 1, they're definitely not passing Algebra 2.
Right.
There's no way. So if you're not even going to allow him to make up that work and just pass him, of course he's not going to pass. And so it is, oh my gosh. And I think it ultimately shows that the leadership, you could talk about the entire city of Baltimore City, just needs better leadership. And I think it starts at the top. The city just doesn't have good accountability, and I think that's kind of where it comes from. So
yeah, I think one of the words I think were thrown out there was responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what it boils down to. There's a failure on multiple ends.
Correct.
A failure of responsibility for the student himself to take self-responsibility, responsibility on the parent. Now, my heart does go out to her. It says in here she's a single mom working 3 jobs, probably not aware. Now, the contention comes where the school had released a report saying what should happen when somebody is absent so many times. They should have gotten an automated phone call. They should have gotten it noted during their summer progress report. But she said none of that did happen. So whether or not the school sent it and it just didn't get to her, or whether or not they actually didn't send it, somewhere in there is the truth.
Sure.
And it should be easy enough.
Yeah, but the kid would have to be aware. I mean, if she's not getting stuff, 3 jobs, she's probably not getting the automated phone call unless it's coming to your cell phone. Yeah. If they're sending paper, through the snail mail kind of thing, then somebody's intercepting that.
Or also in the city, a lot of people are transient in the city. And so they could have moved several times and they might not have
they're sending it to the wrong address.
They might not have the correct address. And so there's multiple things here.
Yeah.
Multiple things with that. So I think that though, as a teacher, my heart hurts because as a teacher, my goal is, it's not necessarily to pass a kid. My goal is to help a student become a responsible citizen and a faithful follower of Jesus. And my heart hurts to see a school that, glad they're not graduating him, but it hurts to see the fact that this school has a kid and maybe even more kids that might not be academically able to have that level of responsibility as a citizen. And I'm not saying it that in that way. I'm talking about what kind of jobs is he going to be good for? What kind of jobs is he qualified for now? Without that high school diploma, there are certain levels of employment that you can only reach to. And, my fear is that they're creating students that know how to run the streets. And that's it, and I'm not saying that's what's happening, but I'm saying that's my first fear is, that's not my goal as a teacher. And that's why my heart hurts so bad, because I feel like that's what's happening to this kid. My worst fear is for him to be running the streets. And it's definitely not what Baltimore City needs. It's definitely not what he needs. So
the article does make mention of a Baltimore County Public School administrator who the Fox News team was able to get a hold of, and he makes some of those same points. He says, the moral obligation that we have to these children, we see, and he made the point of we see the crime rates in the streets, we see the level of poverty, and this is a contributing factor when there's a lack of education. And lack of accountability. And so I think bringing that Christian perspective into it, we can see you train a child up in the way they should go, and even when they're old, they will not depart from it. There's a training and a responsibility on parents, but when the parent is not able to be around because they're working so much, then also those who step in that parental role, which, like it or not, educators kind of fill that role while a student is under their care.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a failure of that training and mentorship of this young individual.
Correct. I know a lot of people who have been saved from the streets and gangs because not a parent, a mentor stepped in, and a godly mentor who held them responsible, held them accountable, and taught them the right way. And I think this man needs a mentor.
Yeah, yeah,
definitely,
for sure. And we pray, hopefully, he can get that.
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. But
cool. Okay. All right, you ready to move on?
I am. Yeah.
All right. So our next topic, also with a couple of different articles attached to it, is the vaccines mostly that have been coming up, but specifically there's a new vaccine from Johnson & Johnson. So while the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines are 2 shots, require 2 shots, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine requires only 1 shot. And certain faith leaders have expressed moral concerns about specifically the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. I know you can go pretty much anywhere. You can see article after article of just vaccines in general. But this one pertains to specifically the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. And really the controversy is surrounded around the use of aborted fetal cells within the vaccine. Yeah. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine uses those as a, quote, see if I can find it here. They call it a, quote, ferry that will take the adenovirus across to the cells. So there's a direct line to this aborted fetal cell strain from 1985, whereas the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines use the more tried method of, they still use aborted fetal cells, not in the vaccine themselves, but as testing for how the cells will respond to that and development of antibodies. So the concern and a lot of pushback from faith leaders is, some say that if given the choice that you can choose not to get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, they say we have the moral obligation not to support something that has at its root an evil act, i.e. the abortion itself, the aborted fetus itself. So in other words, if you're able to choose the other Moderna or Pfizer ones, you should. Some say that in the case where that's not really a choice, it's still acceptable, still morally acceptable to do that, such as Bishop Joseph Strickland. Bishop Joseph Strickland of Tyler, Texas, said he opposes the use of any COVID vaccine with any connection. So he takes that more hardline approach to aborted human fetal cells. So it's a very touchy subject, but I know we've kind of covered vaccines a little bit on this show before, but how do we navigate? And what would you tell maybe a student who was...
So I'm going to tread lightly here, because there are a lot of faithful Bible-believing people who refuse to get vaccines for this reason. And I'm not judging them. I think that, they have the freedom to choose whether or not they want to get vaccinated. So from what I understand, that the cells that they're using they're vesicles. So it's not like they're using DNA from the aborted fetuses. They're not using tissue. They're just using cells literally as a ferry to transmit the virus into the person. So, I mean, there's no DNA in there. If it's just a cell, but there's nothing that can code for life, should that be okay? Should it not be okay? Moreover, I think the bigger picture here is that I think there's going to be a time where Christians are going to have to take a stand, and this is probably it's a bigger picture. But my first thought about seeing this is it's the little things. It's the little things. Like we allow aborted fetus cells to be used here. We allow this to be used here. We allow this to be used here, and all of a sudden it's a bigger faith issue for us. And so I think this just goes to the fact that I think we might not suffer physical persecution, but I think we as Christians might suffer social persecution. The fact that there's going to be a time where we might have to take a stand over something. Sure. It might not be aborted. It might not be a vaccine, but I think there's going to be a time where we might have to stand up for something. And I think, you have to decide, where's that line going to be for you? Right. I did the Christian Medical and Dental Association did put out a statement, and I did look this up. And so I want to read to you what I found about it, because there are other, so if you have had the chicken pox, or you've had the measles, mumps, rubella, chicken pox, all of those contain aborted fetal cell lines. The flu shot is not. So there are vaccines that you probably already had that you don't realize it. The statement by CMDA brings up the fact that you should know where your vaccine is coming from. I mean, is that something that you would want to know? Is it something that you, as a responsible person who's taking care of your health, should know where your vaccine's coming from? I don't know if that's a medical professional's responsibility to explain that to you. I mean, I think if you ask, that you probably should. But anyway, the CMDA also pointed out that there are other means of creating vaccines. There are other means of creating vaccines than using fetal cell lines as a vesicle. And the John Paul II Medical Research Institute uses umbilical cord and adult stem cells for their research and their vaccines. So,
as one of those other means.
Correct. So I think I think it's a moral decision we all have to make at some point.
Sure. Well, thank you.
Can I just say that it's very sad that we couldn't keep the baby, but we can keep some of their stem cells so that we can use them for research?
It is.
That was a point. That was a point that was
very, very sad.
I had actually asked several of my kids what they thought about it, and my kids said, "Well, who signed off on them being able to use those cells?" And do you sign off on the cells of your aborted fetus being able to be used for research, or is that something that once it's out of you, it's no longer your property? And I hate to put it in that way, but that's the way we treat aborted fetuses.
Right. Is it the same as a cadaver?
Correct.
That's been,
correct.
used for medical research.
Yeah.
And it is a little depressing to be having this conversation.
Yeah.
But I think you kind of started down the road of made me think of this when we compromise on things. We're going to have to come to a point where we figure out how much are we willing to compromise. And there's a saying, I think Reese uses it a lot. It's compromise is the mother of deception. So when we allow a compromise, and in the case, and I think that's kind of the point that the bishops here, a lot of them were making, was that when there's a better option, choose the better option. We have the moral responsibility to choose the better option. Can
you explain again the difference?
So the Pfizer and the Moderna ones do not use actual cells. The Johnson & Johnson one uses the aborted fetal cells that have been reproduced over and over. It's not like from the original, but it's from that same cell line. So that it has a more direct connection to the initial event, the initial, let's call it what it is, murder. But the Moderna and Pfizer ones use...
they used it in their trials.
In trials, not actual.
So the vaccine
it's not in the vaccine itself.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not contained. And that's and this kind of hits home with, like, for example, the Catholic Hospital, the Holy Cross Hospital in Silver Spring, Maryland, received 500 doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine this week. So they were faced with this moral conundrum. Do we administer this? They do, however, plan to administer it as soon as possible because that's what's available to them. So even Catholic leaders have said that when no other option is available.
Yeah. Do you see it as a compromise to remind ourselves that God uses all things for his purposes, that he can take sin and evil and use it in a way to make his plan come to fruition? I mean, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, and I'm not saying that I'm a proponent of the argument I'm making right now, as much as it's something that had occurred to me, that that child who was murdered, now look at what, I mean, almost gave their life purpose. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, that's not that's not a reason to do it in the future from my perspective, but I feel like
it's not a justification, but you can say, like Joseph said, what you intended for evil, God intended for good.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I think that's why there is this provision that a lot of faith leaders have said, if there's no better option, then it's still morally acceptable to take the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. But when a better option is presented, we should distance ourselves as much as possible from that evil.
Yeah.
I think is the argument being made.
Yeah. You know, I know people who are not using Google, who are not using Facebook because of big tech's stance on moral and social issues. And, you know, I'm firmly convinced that there's going to come a time where I'm going to have to make that decision too. And I'm trying to prepare myself with, okay, how far is too far? How far is too far will I let society say is okay? Right. You know? So, I think it's the overall picture that this is kind of concerning.
Right. And it is, like we constantly say on this show, it's that perspective, that eternal perspective.
Yeah.
Right. Bringing that into view. Is God going to nail you at Judgment Day for taking one vaccine over the other? I think he has more grace than that.
Yeah.
But it is a consideration that I think we would do well to ponder and utilize our minds, you know, kind of foreshadowing on one of our upcoming stories. But we have a responsibility not just to be lazy about it, but to use our minds and engage with these questions, because it allows us to build our faith and to stand up for what we believe in.
Mary Kay, can I ask you personally, you as a Catholic, your thoughts on this?
I have to weigh a lot of things and try to make the best decision I can. For my dad's sake, I really cannot get sick.
Okay.
All right. Because of having to take care of him, because he is also high risk. And my mom who passed away, she did get COVID, and I have to say it was a miracle it didn't kill her, because she was just out of having chemotherapy, and you couldn't be more immune compromised, I think, than she was. And somehow, some way, COVID didn't affect her. You know how our personal biology seems to give certain people the ability to fight it off?
Yeah.
I don't.
Of God.
Yeah.
Really.
I mean, you know, science hasn't, I guess, come up with a better explanation than that. I can't risk that for Dad. So I'm scheduled. I found out I got my appointment tomorrow morning. I don't know which one they're going to have available. I would choose the other vaccine over the Johnson & Johnson, for the simple purpose of, you know, it won't be in me.
Yeah.
But there's a part of me that has to think that God is using this child's life for good. And I don't want to be remembered for my name. I don't want to be remembered for anything other than that thing that Nora gave us the other day, just yesterday. Love of family, love of faith, love of family, love of friends. A friend of mine, a new friend of mine, told me that her mom wanted on her gravestone when she passed the words "she loved," and I feel like that's exactly where I'm at. I want people to remember me for that.
Yeah.
So, I want to know that my life was given for God's good. And I guess there's a part of me that is thinking that, okay, no to abortion. It should have never been done. But God is taking this evil and is hopefully making some good out of it by these vaccines. So I almost feel like it's honoring the death of that child in a way. But yeah, if I had a choice of going with one without, I mean, I've already allowed my kids to get that chickenpox vaccine without knowing. I mean, I didn't know until you said so today.
Right.
All those other vaccines that they're required to get in order to be in school, I just went ahead and got them because, yes, protect my child.
Yeah.
I didn't do all the research because we would, as human beings, we would be spending our entire time researching everything and having to be paranoid about everything to be fully knowledgeable on everything. Because a lot of times they don't give you the information about those vaccines until after they've given you the shot.
Yep.
Then they hand it over to you and you're like, oh, well, gee. So, yeah, as a Catholic, we never condemn somebody who has gotten that. In fact, there's charities in the Catholic Church for helping support women who have.
Okay.
But we don't condone it, obviously. And so, yeah, whatever steps we can take to stay away from it. But you have to balance it with other things. And for me, that's my dad.
Yeah.
And being able to be there for him and for him to not get sick.
Yeah. Thank you for that opinion.
Yeah, good points.
Thank you.
Just kind of real quick in the and kind of an addendum to this story, there's another story under this same headline that we wanted to just briefly touch on is the Johnson & Johnson. Yes, there's the moral concerns about it, but also there's another story here from the Baltimore Sun talking about how this planned vaccine, the trials are planning to include infants. So, you know, that they've been approved for emergency use, like we had talked about on another episode. But this is saying that the planned trials that they have include testing for children 12 and older. Is now, I'm sorry, the Moderna and the Pfizer ones are being tested on children 12 and older currently. The Johnson & Johnson ones plan on testing them on infants, newborns, infants, and even pregnant mothers, just to see the effects. And of course, there's this whole plan to see the effects, and eventually the last group of people to be tested on would be immunocompromised persons. So when we're talking about just the whole morality of not only the vaccine itself, but also the testing process, here's another side to the story, is what is our responsibility? What should our Christian response be in terms of the testing process? Is this acceptable?
I mean, you got to think those kids are vulnerable.
Sure.
So what, as a parent, do you sign off on your kid going through this clinical trial, maybe not fully understanding what this vaccine does? We don't fully understand how long this vaccine is going to last. There's a lot of questions we still don't even know. So, you know, I as a parent, I'm not a parent, but to confidently allow my child to go through a clinical trial, I don't think it would be an option. I think I would have to see proof of longevity, some long-term data, because we don't have a lot of long-term data, even on this vaccine. So, you know, again, I think that's a moral issue that we also have to consider. Definitely.
Yeah, and as a parent, I'm not going to condemn someone who has signed off to have their child tested, but again, that wouldn't be my choice for sure. Is because there is a certain level of trust that you have, just to Mary Kay's point, when you have them vaccinated for rubella and chickenpox and things like that. You test that it works, but there's a difference here in that this is a novel virus. It's a novel vaccine, not even really fully approved by the FDA.
Correct.
So it's really uncharted territory as to the effects of that. And as a parent, one of my responsibilities to my children is to protect them. And so I feel like by allowing them to have this clinical trial, I would weigh the risk factor versus protection factor. And for me, it wouldn't be worth it.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right. Well, let's move on to our third segment. Allison, would you like to introduce these?
Absolutely. So, okay. So the next topic we're going to talk about is states lifting COVID-19 mandates. So, the first article I have here is about Texas lifting the COVID-19 mask mandate. Do you want to see what that Facebook post
is
about?
In response to our other article that we just talked about, Tim Foster, hey Tim, thanks for joining us, says, what is the hurry here? This pandemic does not impact children at all, as it seems.
Yeah.
And that's one of those risk factors that I would weigh. And for me, actually our pediatrician, for those of you who don't know, we actually got COVID back in November. And my wife was really concerned because she's breastfeeding. We have an infant. He's 8 months old now. But initially, when Katie got tested, the nurse who tested her said, because Katie expressed that concern, she said, what should I do with my infant? He's still breastfeeding. And she said, oh, you need to stay away from him, wear a mask when you're breastfeeding, all of these things, stay away from him as much as possible. When you have an infant, that's not as doable as you might think, because come to find out, we both ended up having it. So when both parents have it, you can't just leave your child sit in the middle of the floor and cry.
Yeah.
So, but we called our pediatrician, and she said, actually just keep doing what you're doing, because if you've both been exposed, then your whole household has been exposed, and kids do really well with this. So our pediatrician, was kind of a godsend for us in that time, because she really reassured us. And come to find out, none of our children exhibited any symptoms. So they didn't even, it went through Katie and I, but they were resistant to it.
Yeah.
And so that's one of those reasons that I would weigh that risk factor, and why I wouldn't unnecessarily introduce the virus into their system if I didn't need to.
Yeah, but I agree. What's the rush? I can understand that. So Texas is now lifting the mask mandate, March 10th, which was
today. It goes into effect today,
Goes into effect today. So Texas is not the only state that has lifted mask mandates. The states of North Dakota, Montana, and Iowa have lifted mask orders in recent weeks. And the governor is urging a return to normalcy, but also stressing the fact that it does not end personal responsibility to, of course, maybe social distance, or maybe not be in large crowds. So is that good enough of an intro? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so when we talk about, and this kind of ties into the whole vaccine issue and what is our moral obligation to protect and love others, Tim says, what do all these states have in common? I think he's pointing out that they're Republican states.
And they're not really, at least the other ones aren't really as populated as Texas.
Right.
Texas has the highest population.
Yeah,
that's why
Texas
it's a big deal.
The reason that Texas is getting more of the news is because they are the third leading state in terms of COVID deaths throughout the pandemic, just subsequent to New York and California. But so this is kind of tied into the moral obligation with the vaccines, is that it's seen as a loving act to protect your neighbor. And I've shared on this show before, I'm not really in a hurry to get it, the vaccine, because we have the antibodies, and I'm following all of those other guidelines as an act of love to friends and family. And so, I do kind of see both sides of this. There's a point of there's a rush for a return to normalcy, which I think we all want. but we still have to take seriously the obligation to protect one another too, out of love. And so I just hope that this doesn't lead to a resurgence in cases of, people here, no masks, no problem.
Yeah.
And so we tend to forget that it's even out there and this even makes the point that 90% of the U.S. population still is unvaccinated. And so with only 10% of the population being vaccinated, we've not reached that herd immunity yet. So what is our obligation to love our neighbors? And the governor makes the point that it doesn't exclude personal responsibility. So I hope that people will kind of take that to heart.
Yeah. I
have a question real quick. Mm-hmm. How long ago was it we were told it was better to double mask? Wasn't that not too long ago?
That long ago? But I don't think anyone ever took that.
Well, some people have, but some people have been double masking all the time anyway, because they just, I guess, are okay with breathing through these things. I'm not so much. But what is it? Did any of those articles give the reason why they decided now is the time that they feel comfortable doing it? Like, is there like a lower positivity rate? Is it
It is.
Yeah,
lower
I'm sorry.
What numbers are backing up their decision? I assume Texas is the one that you might have.
Mm-hmm.
Hospitalizations are the lowest level since October. They've dropped to about 7,600 cases, down from about 10,000 since mid-February. So they're going. So this article is saying that part of it's going off the number of cases.
Mm-hmm.
But just that.
I'm sure there's more tied into it, but that's just what this article is just telling us. So, but I'm sure there's more tied into it.
7.1% of its nearly 30 million residents have been fully vaccinated. So they have a 7.1% vaccination rate in the population of Texas. But so some critics of the Texas governor have been more cynical as to the reasoning behind this, and even so far as stating that this is a distraction from the poor leadership during the rolling blackouts of the snowpocalypse that went through. I hope that's not the case, because that would be reckless. But in other proponents for him say no, it's a good thing. He talks about, and I'm sure all governors were kind of torn between people saying one thing on one side and another thing on another side. So it's difficult to make those decisions and try to make the most informed decision that you can. At least you hope that your leadership is doing that.
Okay, but he's not the only governor who's choosing to do this. Yes. So the rolling blackouts were terrible. I can tell you that because my brother lives in Texas and he was describing some of the things he had to go through. But you've got, how many other states did you say?
At least 3. Iowa,
North Dakota, and Montana.
Okay. So they're making the choice for some reason to lift the mask mandates. And I assume that's all they're lifting. Just they're still saying wash your hands, don't
social distance.
right.
No large crowds. Okay. So he's not the only one making that choice. So I feel like the people who are saying it just has to do with these rolling blackouts they're just trying to
looking for a reason.
Yeah. I feel like that's kind of dumb. But I don't know. You're right, though. It's a much more populated state, especially around the cities. Are they making it so it's still the local jurisdiction's choices?
Yes.
Yes. However, they cannot. The governor has said that local jurisdictions can, if it reaches a certain, it was like over 15% of their capacity in hospitals. If it reaches over that threshold, they can impose mandates again on the local level. However, they cannot impose strictly, I think, the return to the masks.
Yeah.
At least.
I don't understand the difference.
Or lockdown.
So I think the governor is giving restaurants and individual industries and companies their own they can make their own decision about whether or not, if you shop in Target, if you get to wear a mask or not. but I think he's saying overall the state in general, it's lifting the overall state mandate of everyone has to wear a mask in the entire state. I think that's what's being lifted.
Yeah, Tim says 16 states do not have a mask mandate.
Yeah, 37 don't have mask mandates.
Yeah, so 16
as of this
do not.
article.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so and you're right, like places like Target that are a national corporation, they have their own company policy.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really what.
Well, yeah, I gather you can have a no shirt, no shoes, no service, no mask, no service.
Right.
Yeah.
kind of
company
thing.
policy, but they're kind of leaving it to that.
Sure.
Not that it's.
But does it?
mandated.
I mean, but a small business
They can
owner
make their own
can
decision.
can say, "I'm sorry, but if you're not wearing a mask, you can't come in here."
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
You know, number one, what is the return to normalcy? What is normal? You know, I personally think that these masks are going to become a part of my everyday life. I know that in Asia, people wear it if they're not feeling well. You know, they'll wear it if they have a cough. So I know that masks are a part of everyday life for some people. And so what is the return to normalcy that all these people are talking about? You know, now that we are post-COVID. So am I going to be bumping your elbow forever? Or am I going to be able to,
bump,
or am I going to be able to hug you? Are we like going to cower away from each other when we get too close? I mean, has our circle of private space increased? You know, what is the new normal going to be now?
And I think that remains to be seen, the psychological effects. Even if all of these things are lifted, we've kind of now become more aware of that as a society. And so we are a germaphobe society now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not going to look exactly the same. Tim mentioned here, he said, I heard that 34 still have mask mandate. So yeah, 34 states still do. Thank you for that correction, Tim. Yeah, I think that's something, and that ties into here when we look at the CDC, kind of still under this heading, this third heading. I'm sorry, do you want to?
Yeah, I can. Okay. Thank you. So the CDC is actually has released guidelines for people fully vaccinated against COVID-19. So the CDC says people fully vaccinated can safely visit other vaccinated people and small groups of unvaccinated people in some circumstances. So the CDC is basically saying, here's what you can do now you're vaccinated. So they consider fully vaccinated as having 2 weeks past the second dose of Moderna and Pfizer, or 2 weeks past a single dose of Johnson & Johnson. So the CDC says fully vaccinated people can visit vaccinated people indoors without masks or distancing, visit indoors unvaccinated people without masks or distancing if they're at low risk for severe disease, and skip quarantine if you're exposed to someone. So now we're being told what to do now that we have or have not had the vaccine. Go ahead. What do you want to say?
I just want to start off with this. This is what really got me on this article. It says, let's see if I can find it here. Here. We continue to have high levels of virus around the country, and more readily transmissible variants have now been confirmed in every state while we work to quickly vaccinate people more and more each day. We have to see this through, Walensky said. Let's stick together. Please keep wearing... that was not the place. A well-fitting mask. It says in here... now I can't find it. Basically, one of those other things was... here it is. So it says... People should still take precautions as transmission risk in these settings are higher and increase the more unvaccinated people are involved. So wear that mask on the treadmill, and if dining out, keep it on while waiting for your meal. I'm sorry, if I got to wear a mask on a treadmill, I'm just going to run outside. There are some more common sense things than that. But yeah, and Tim has shared a post here. A link to find out if your state has a mask mandate due to coronavirus. So if you are interested in finding out whether or not your state or which states have one, you can use that link. Tim says the CDC is playing the role of Caesar here. Should we pay taxes to Caesar? There's more to this. Asks the politically correct Christian. Smiley face. I mean, there's definitely a concern of overstep, I would say, for sure, as far as, now, because that's the goalpost, I think, is continually being moved down the line.
Yeah.
At first it was 15 days to start the curve. Now the goalpost was, just the lockdowns for however long they're going to last. Then it was, let's get past the summer. Let's get past the travel time. Let's get past the fall and the flu and all of these. So now it's, well, the light at the end of the tunnel was the vaccine. And that's maybe another point to be made here is the level of how much should we put our faith in the vaccine? Not that I'm saying that it's not a good thing, but do we as Christians sometimes hold up this vaccine as a stand-in for a savior for us? Are we looking to the vaccine to save us, or are we looking to Jesus Christ to save us?
Good point.
And so, the point here Tim's making is playing the role of Caesar. Now, of course, Caesar would be the government, so they're advising the government. So yeah, there is concern for overstep. That's been throughout the whole pandemic. We've seen government oversteps and legitimate oversteps, I believe, in some cases. But there again, back to your point, is we are going to have to come to a conclusion for ourselves. How much do we we render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, render unto God what is God's, and that's dealing more so with taxes. But is there room here for what's the term I'm looking for? Not peaceful protest, but a peaceful non-compliance kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
And so where are the boundaries of that as far as a Christian? What's for peaceful non-compliance?
I don't even know where that would start.
Yeah, so say somebody is fully vaccinated, or do they have to follow the CDC guidelines as if they're law, because they're just guidelines, right? So is being non-compliant with the CDC reckless, or is being non-compliant with the CDC just a personal choice?
Yeah, I think that's part of my concern when reading this article too. Is so this is what the CDC says. What's the next step? You can't come into the store because you're not vaccinated, or how do I know if you're vaccinated? Is there a mark on you that says you're vaccinated? So, me in the way that I catastrophize things, I'm thinking down the road. Okay, if I choose not to get the vaccine, am I not allowed to go see my aunt? Because my aunt said I can't come see her until I'm vaccinated. And okay, so does that mean I can't go shopping at Target if I'm not getting vaccinated? Or, is there a possibility that, there could be some discrimination down the line for people that are choosing not to get vaccinated, or if they do? So I think it's all about control. I think when things are out of control, people try to take control.
Sure.
And I think this is just, an opportunity to take control and trying to control chaos.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do want to let you know of this. I did look this up. I saw this. One of my students told me about this, and I want to bring this up too along this line. The Burroughs High School baseball team was suspended over photos violating COVID health orders. I'm gonna spring this on you because I just found it today. So there was a baseball team.
I do it to them all the time.
There was a baseball team who took a photo. They were suspended after pictures emerged that shows the team violating coronavirus protocols. So it is a baseball team that plays baseball together.
Okay.
And they're playing baseball together, practicing games, and they were suspended over a photo without masks or social distancing. So the entire varsity baseball team, they were all suspended. They were actually trying to cancel the whole season, but that didn't happen. So the actual photo is actually something that is tradition. Apparently, that's what the photo looks like. They're sitting on a wall and they're looking straight ahead. It's not like they're not touching each other, but they were suspended because of a photo. So, I mean,
what if they were all holding their breath?
Where does it end? Maybe.
Right. Where is that eventual goalpost? And will we ever reach it? Yeah, and my question would be, so I guess they're required to wear masks on the ball field while they're playing?
I mean, apparently? I think that's a state. I think it's a state by state thing.
Okay.
I know that when I would practice with my girls, when I did field hockey, you had to wear a mask when you played field hockey. Yeah, that's great, but that's not going to stop all of the exchange of germs and all that other stuff that's going on.
Transmission through contact.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of ways to transmit germs, even without a mask. So
sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, Tim mentions 2 comments here. It says, let's just jump to the chase. How long till all public gatherings, including church services, will require vaccines, and those who choose to not be vaccinated will be barred from coming to church?
Yep.
Yeah, well, I mean, the concern still, it's that government oversight. I doubt that will be a case wholesale, because we've seen in the lockdown, we've seen churches push back against government overstep.
Yeah.
And we've seen some cases of legitimate and illegitimate oversteps. So I understand, and honestly, and part of me, that I am concerned there too, Tim. I don't think it's going to be a wholesale problem necessarily, at least not immediately. But the concern there is for the future. But maybe on a church by church basis, just like establishment by establishment basis, just like the Targets and the Walmarts and whatever, each establishment can have its own set of guidelines. So if one church bars you from coming, maybe find another option. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't see that necessarily being a wholesale problem. But as we look toward the future, we see, and I think I had shared this maybe last episode, with the concern there is, do I think the vaccine is a mark? No. Do I think maybe it's conditioning us, conditioning people to be more receptive to these oversteps? Possibly.
Yeah.
And so where's that line that we draw? And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to dismiss the baseball story. I think
I just thought it was funny.
Yeah, no, it is. It's interesting in that it's a tradition thing, and yeah, I think that also speaks to the cancel culture of,
right.
we want to demonize people who aren't following the rules exactly.
Yeah.
But how many people who called for that cancellation of the baseball team have at some point, I'm sure if there was a camera on those people 24/7, they at some point violated CDC guidelines.
Yeah.
Because nobody's perfect. Even right now, we're not necessarily 16 chihuahuas apart. So there has to be some grace there. And the photograph was really, I'm sure, just a quick, innocuous, traditional, this is what we usually do. So, yeah, I would, I don't know. I think we just need to simmer down as a people. We need to simmer down.
All right. And so the last topic that we're going to be talking about is lazy Christianity. Okay. The first article that I'm going to bring up was an opinion article in the New Yorker titled "The Wasting of the Evangelical Mind." The first statement he makes is all about the Capitol invasion and how there were people of faith at the Capitol invasion. And he makes a statement saying the intermingling of religious faith, conspiratorial thinking, and misguided nationalism is perhaps the evidence of the church's role in bringing this country to the dangerous moment. So the article basically goes on to outline how the church has stepped away from reason and science and is now sort of a excuse for people to maybe misguided or to not understand all of the story. Evangelicalism in America has come to be defined by its anti-intellectualism. Ouch.
Yeah.
That hurts. I consider myself a very intelligent person. So because I'm a Christian.
But you're anti-science, Al.
The
science teacher.
Let's
anti-science.
That's another podcast. All right. Next week we can talk about that. But faith and reason. What do you say about that?
It's kind of humorous to me, actually. I do appreciate how this person who wrote this article went through the history of, after McCarthyism in the 60s. It was kind of this demonizing and blacklisting of people suspected of communism. It's kind of like it all led up to this point. It even goes back to, the Puritans, and there's this split in the evangelicalism, and then now there's the neo-evangelicalism, and this contrast between fundamentalism and evangelicalism. And I know these are all kind of words that were thrown out here, but basically the evangelicals tended more toward the experiential side of faith, and fundamentalists stuck with the or evangelical meaning to evangelize and go out there, and then fundamentalists stuck with more of the traditional scripture and inerrancy of scripture and all of this. And so I did appreciate how he went through kind of a brief overview of history here and tried to tie it in. However, I think the conclusion that he draws is a little lacking there. I definitely felt that offense too. You know, my undergrad, I went to Eastern University, and their
So did I.
byline. What?
I totally did.
What's their byline? Faith, reason, justice.
Faith, reason, justice.
Yes.
No way.
This is a revelation now we're having on this show.
That is so cool.
That's funny. I'll ask you later what you're.
Yeah, definitely.
But okay, so yeah, I mean that's one of those things, and it's interesting. It's really funny.
Ken and I both went to. We both went to the University of Delaware, so.
Did you go to Eastern too?
That would be funny.
University of Delaware.
Okay.
Fighting Blue Hens.
No, and it's actually funny. I went to Eastern, and when I decided to go, one of the people in my church, my home church growing up, asked my parents. They're like, "You sure you want to send your son there? That's
Mine too.
That's a liberal
Mine
Christian
too.
school."
Yeah, said the same thing.
It's so funny because
Same thing.
you're gonna have polarizing views no matter what, no matter where you go. But yeah, I found the conclusion that he draws from here lacking, especially the one thing, I guess the main point that I want to draw from here. He says in the last two paragraphs, during the Trump era, it became clear that the wasting of the evangelical mind could even have dire consequences on American democracy. For Christian thinking to flourish, Knoll argues that evangelicals must be willing to exchange some of the cultural and theological ornamentation that mark their movement for what is truly indispensable. Much of what is distinctive about American evangelical is not essential to Christianity. And this is where I disagree with him. He says, he writes, instead of obsessing over biblical inerrancy, evangelicals should understand the Bible as pointing us to the Savior and orienting our entire experience to the service of God. Rather than focusing solely on evangelism, evangelicals should realize the gratitude of God can engender an array of other praiseworthy responses. And in place of a belief that a life devoted to God must begin with a sudden, life-changing religious experience, evangelicals should understand that it can unfold in a more gradual process. To confuse the distinctive with the essential is to compromise the life-transforming character of Christian faith. That was a mouthful, but so his third point where he says that evangelicals, that a life devoted to God must begin with a sudden life-changing religious experience. I agree with that. It doesn't have to. And I don't know any serious evangelical who would argue that point to say, like, if you don't have a conversion, maybe there are, but if you don't have a strong conversion point, then you're not really saved. You're not really converted. I would agree with that one. But the stickler for me, he said, instead of obsessing over biblical inerrancy, evangelicals should understand the Bible as pointing to salvation, pointing us to our Savior, and orienting our entire experience to the service of God. I wrote over top of those, basically what he's talking about is salvation and lordship. So instead of biblical inerrancy, we should focus on Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. Yes, we should focus on Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, but I wrote under here, but if we compromise, this is going back to that compromise thing, if we compromise on biblical inerrancy, then it's like digging a sinkhole under your foundation.
Yeah.
Right? So there are certain things that even biblical inerrancy has its roots in scholarship. And you know, the problem here, I think, for the nominal Christians who are really Christian by name only, and that's probably more than not, that we've seen is that there's this biblical illiteracy, that there are, and it points to it in the next article, that most people don't pick up their Bible from Sunday to Sunday.
Yeah.
And so there's this biblical illiteracy where this is why we titled this Lazy Christianity, where Christians are really just, it's a consumer Christianity. How can you feed me? People go to different churches all the time because I wasn't feeling fed.
Yeah.
That's one of those big things. And I agree with the call to and capture that reason that, you know, we've said this before, you know, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength.
Yeah.
You know, it's your whole person, you know, is the command, the first and greatest command. And so,
I mean, Jesus himself was a scholar.
Yeah, they call him rabbi, teacher.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Is there some concern that there's evangelicals out there who are not thinking that Jesus is their Lord and Savior and they need to serve God and that they're only concerned with the Bible? I mean, is that what the
I guess from this,
I mean, because I'm Catholic, as we've already established. And frankly, you're all Protestants to me. I don't know what the distinction always is between some of the other denominations, whether they're considered evangelical or not. I always get yelled at about thinking everybody's Protestants because not all of you stemmed from, Martin Luther. But most of the Christians I've met who are not Catholic, let's just put it that way, they seem to be concerned, with all of that.
Yeah, exactly. And
they're not like, I don't know that many that are, focused too much on one versus the other.
Right.
And the only thing I have had a couple of people who are like, well, when were you saved? And I'm like, I've always believed in Jesus as my savior. I can't pinpoint a time when I didn't. But I grew up in the faith and some of them didn't. So I know that's not always true for everybody. They didn't have the same journey as I am having. But there were a couple of them that couldn't believe that I've always believed in Jesus.
Yeah. And go ahead.
And for me, I never thought of it as a denominational thing. I always thought, well, that wasn't their experience, so they couldn't understand somebody who'd had my experience. Just like their experience wasn't mine, and I had difficulty sort of understanding, having that aha conversion moment where there was a point in time, where there was a point in time when you could say I didn't on this side of the timeline, but I did on this side. So I guess that's just my Catholic.
No, and that was kind of my gripe with the ending of this. And Ken, actually, from sitting right over here, says, how did I end up taking the show off where we're talking about faith and reason? I knew he'd be sitting over there biting his tongue. # apologetics is what he says. So, Ken, if you'd like to weigh in, here.
I got it. I'm moving.
I just say that, are there segments within Christianity where, sometimes we don't, there are certain people, for example, that will, think of faith, or the definition of faith as being, belief in spite of evidence or belief without evidence. Absolutely. Is that something, a discussion that we need to have within the Christian church? Sure it is. Now, to paint with such a broad brush and say that, modern evangelicalism is anti-intellectual is frankly somewhat naive and borderline insulting to all of the evangelical academics that are out there. And the former head of the Human Genome Project, guess what? He's a Christian.
Yeah.
And so it's like, are you going to tell me that he's anti-intellectual?
Yeah.
Right.
That's just Francis.
And so there's
got a master's in chemistry.
John Polkinghorne is another good example. Well, I don't agree with him theologically and everything. You can't say John Polkinghorne is anti-intellectual. And so it's just this type of thing where it's like, really, have you even researched your thesis here? Anyway, so that's my thing. And I think, Ben, I think Tim Foster said some things before me that you didn't comment on. So I'm just going to point that out right now before I turn over the mic.
I'm sorry, Tim. Yeah, he did. It was buried under here. I got to scroll my screen down here. Before Ken, Tim said John 15:18. If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. Amen. And he said it's just a matter of time before this is completely fulfilled in the USA and around the world. Yeah, I think we see that. There's definitely a bias, and I don't know, Tim, if that was in reference to the previous article or this one, but I think it applies to this one too.
This one.
Okay, thank you. I think it's a matter of time. Oh, Pastor Jay says the Pope needs to understand consubstantiation, hence the degree. LOL.
My goodness.
Go away, Pastor Jay.
We can have a separate segment on transubstantiation, consubstantiation, and Christian lingo and all of that. But anyway, to Tim's point, there's going to be a time, we see a definite bias here.
Absolutely.
So if it's not outright persecution, I don't think it's outright persecuting, but it's calling out evangelicals for being anti-intellectual, and it really is trying to draw a line between what happened on January 6th with the rise of, because there was a Christian undertone to some of it. It talks about how the so-called QAnon shaman, the guy with the bullhorns and whatever, and face painted, stood in the middle of the Senate and building and said a prayer. And so, there's this certainly Christian underpinnings of that. And that's kind of the danger when we see, we got to wrap this up soon. So I'm just going to make this quick point. But that's the danger when we see this, when there is that segment of Christianity that's nominal and by name only and do things in the name of Christ, that there's a disparity between those of us who really take that to heart, the faith, reason, justice, the using all your heart, soul, mind, and strength.
Yeah, and real quickly, the last part of this segment is the article about pastors unintentionally discouraging people from reading their Bible. There was a poll done on Facebook, and the writer, this was from Outreach Magazine, and the writer of this article took remarks from people on Facebook about ways that pastors are discouraging people from their Bible reading. And I just want to say that, I think, as if I was a Christian and I was seeing someone who maybe was being deceived by something that they were seeing on social media, I felt like it would be my responsibility to say, okay, let's look at all the evidence. Let's really see if what you're believing is true. But I think that this article also leads to the fact that Christians have a personal responsibility in their faith walk. And do you want to read that first before I go into that?
Sorry, we got two comments. Tim's going in response to Pastor Jay. Typical Lutheran big word response, smiley face. Now I need to Google that word. And he gave us a definition. Consubstantiation, the doctrine, especially in Lutheran belief, that the substance of the bread and wine coexists with the body and blood of Christ in the Eucharist.
Yeah.
As opposed to transubstantiation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah. So the article just talks about, he polled a couple people on Facebook, and there were basically it was basically saying that, pastors, if you aren't aware of it, you might be discouraging people from reading the Bible. And so while he brought up things like, being too intellectual, maybe using too much Greek and Hebrew.
I felt
Allison
convicted, personally attacked.
Yes, you have just offended Ben.
Well, this statement's really true, because when my former pastor brought this phrase out, I tuned him out. Said this verb in Greek is past plural, perfect, intransitive, and when coupled with an indirect object. What?
Yeah.
I mean,
Pastor Jay even
I don't think I got
some
that
Greek
far.
there last.
I just say a word and explain it.
Yeah, but the article says, lip service, again, going back to the Bible being or pastors being not necessarily tying their sermon to the scripture, but maybe reading one scripture verse and then giving a sermon on maybe a whole other topic. But there may be, I think the article was pointing, just be aware, be careful, because you also might be contributing to the discouraging of reading Bibles. So
I think this is it's a helpful article in so much as it causes us to hold a mirror up to ourselves, those of us who preach the word, and to hold a mirror up and say, is the message that I'm trying to get across being lost by the messenger, right? And that's never what we want. And so it's always helpful to reevaluate that. And some of these I'm like, oh, okay, this is causing me to think, and maybe in the future, tweak how I might say something in Greek. Don't use all of this is past plural, is the aorist tense, whatever. And so pluperfect. And,
I do know what aorist means, by the way.
Yeah.
I had to look that up myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, this is by way of example. and so maybe keep it simple. And, that's maybe one of the things that we want to encourage people on one hand to love their Bible and to want to get into it. And so we don't want to be a deterrent to that. And I think the same goes not necessarily just for those who preach, but for anybody in your conversations. If you don't love the word, people are going to get excited about what you get excited about. So if you're not excited about getting in the word, if you're not conveying that love for scripture, then nobody else is going to want to either.
Yeah. I asked several of my students, I was like, do you guys read the Bible? Why or why not? And one of my students says, well, I was excited because I thought we were going to have a study group where we could be held accountable and discuss it. that group never happened. I have another girl who said, I just don't understand it. There's no one that can help me kind of understand it. And what I really took away from this article was the last point 7. We discourage people when we do not model faithfulness in this area. And, I think as Christians, that's our responsibility, is to teach and to model and to help mentor others. And, I do agree, as what you said before, is, we're not coming to church just to be entertained. I think there is a level of responsibility where I need to have my own personal motivation to read the Bible. But yet, then again, I also need to make sure that, what I'm doing is also helping other people, bringing them alongside, helping them kind of understand the reason and the joy that we get from doing it.
Amen.
So
yeah, absolutely. Share that joy.
All right. So I'm going to have to cut you off in like 4 minutes. Less, really. We did have a couple more comments. Sherry says that she thinks of you every time she hears the word agape.
Thank you, Sherry.
And Tim, because of your sermon using it, and Tim says, Jesus, Peter, do you love me? Peter, yes, Lord, I like you.
Perfect example, though, and thank you for bringing that up. And I know
we don't really have time.
Real quick.
So I was just gonna say, that I think that the response to the pastor article is just everything in moderation, because I think there are a lot of people who do like understanding the different words that these translations were based on, but don't overdo it.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So exactly. Sign off now.
So, well, thank you so much for everybody online, everybody who is joining us tonight for engaging. Thank you, Allison, for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Stay tuned if you're on Facebook, hop over to our YouTube channel because we have our Lent at Home. We have 2 things actually happening at the same time simultaneously. We have our Lent at Home service, which starts in just a matter of 3 minutes. And shameless plug, yours truly will be on that, although it's pre-recorded, so you won't see me live. But it's premiering now. And then also our Life of Paul study is going to be there as well on our YouTube channel. This is the last week for that. So pick one or the other, whichever one you want, and then come back later and watch the other after the fact.
Get off here quickly, Life of Paul won't be on here.
That's true. So I'm going to sign off. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you for having me.
Ken. Thank you, Mary Kay. Thank you, everybody. God bless.